we're taking the intro of a Brad Mehldau solo of one line, and we're gonna learn it very thoroughly and at least prep ourselves for the extent of gleaming all the information that we can from this one particular line. So, let's start by listening to it. Is that it? Is that all?
Yep.
Okay, so where it ends on the B flat?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a pretty easy one. I would say the first thing we should do is just learn to play it.
Yeah.
So get it. I use an app called Transcribe. So you press the space bar to start playing and space to stop. Do you have Transcribe?
Yeah, that's what I use.
Okay, cool. So turn my volume up.
You want to flip it to the overhead?
What's that?
You want to flip it to the overhead so that when it...
Oh, can you not see it?
No, I see your face.
Oh, yeah, because I have to go there. Do you see it now?
No.
Oh, I wonder why it stopped sharing. Here, 1 second. Switch screen. Boom. Alright. That should do it.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to take the Transcribe app and just make it tiny so that you can then... I'll just put it over my face if that's okay with you, so you can see my hands. Is it on there? Is that right?
Yeah, it's fine.
Let me change this to Do Not Disturb. Now, pay attention to when you're learning to play it. Pay attention to two things: the notes, but then also the accents and the velocity, obviously. But because that'll come into play in our analysis later. Okay, cool. So I'm already seeing there's certain elements of this that make it as interesting as you hear. So is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Cool. So that's the first thing that I would do. The second thing is, if we really want to analyze it, I put it into a notation software. Do you have any notation software?
No, I didn't. I know you told me to go get it. I've been busy this week. I will do it, I promise.
Okay. Yeah, I would just recommend Sibelius. So I'll open up Sibelius. New score, piano. Alright, so that probably doesn't start on one like I'm hearing it. And we'll probably have to listen to the context to see where it actually starts. But I'll play it in first. So first thing I'm going to do here is plug in my piano. If you don't have a piano that has MIDI on it, or you're using a keyboard, yeah?
Yeah, I have a digital. It has MIDI. It has a bunch of stuff, actually.
Great. All right, so you'll be able to just do exactly what I'm doing. Mine is kind of unique in that it's an acoustic piano.
Let's see.
And it has MIDI functionality. All right, so I'm just going to record this real quick. It's going to be slower. So that's there. Now I'm going to have it renotate the performance so that it looks cleaner. Alright, so it does it in, it sees my swung notes as 16th notes here, but whatever, that's fine. This is just for visual purposes. We just want to see what's going on.
Yeah.
Alright, so now let's listen for the context of it. Okay, it is right on 1. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Yep, it was on 1. That's crazy. Well, that's a monkism. The way that he's playing it, it doesn't sound like it's actually starting on 1, but it is starting on 1. Like, you wouldn't normally accent ba-ba-doo-doom. Like... Like this, a phrase like this would normally start on the first beat, but he's starting it on the 4. It's pretty interesting. But these are
It took me so long to remember where it was from. I was like, this sounds like Monk. This has to be Monk.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, Meldau is obviously like influenced by Monk, and and gleams aspects of of Monk's improvisational and compositional intent.
Yeah.
All right. So it sounds like I don't think he's going around the blues progression yet. Wait, is Think of One, is that over a blues progression? I can't remember. Do you know?
I don't know, because I'm not really familiar with blues progression.
I don't think it is, actually. If I remember, I mean, it's bluesy for sure, but I actually think of One is not a blues progression, but I can't remember.
Well, the recording that you first played off the 10 Years album, that starts out about as standard as he plays it straight. Like, he doesn't mess around.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just ABA form. It's not a blues. I should know this, but it's cool. Okay, so what he's playing there, if we're looking at the let's see if he's even going through any chord progression specifically. Let's do this. What I'd like to do is reference the actual song itself. I'm going to pull up a chord chart for Think of One and just see what the actual chords are.
Sure.
Is it like not... Is it seriously not here?
I don't think it's one of his more well-known tunes.
I've heard a ton of people play it though.
Yeah.
Why? So Bemshell Swing. I mean, you evidence. Oh, there we go. Think of one. Okay. Yeah, there it is. So that's what I thought. I don't know why that's so flat. Oh, yeah. Oh. Okay, so let's check this out. That is kind of a complicated chord progression. So if we're following the chord progression, it's F, B, D, E, A, flat, D.
Do you want to pull up the video? I'm looking at Google and the other one. Can't really see you play.
Oh, cool. Yeah, for sure. There, but I need to be looking at this chart too, which is on Safari. Let me just grab that into preview. Okay, so we have our chart here, and this will tell us the chord progression. Okay, so the first thing that I observe is that he's going through the chord progression. And the way that I can tell that is because it seems like he's hitting, like he's just hitting the 4, but if you look at the line that he's playing on top, if you put the chords in the bass of Think of One, and I just looked up Think of One Monk online, went to Google Images and found the chart for it. It's F to B flat. So it would be the 13 of B flat, and then so that sort of works over that. It's a little weird because it's like the flat 5 of D minor, but then it's going to the 5, ending on the 5 of E flat 7, and then this other where he gets kind of weird here. He's actually outlining an A flat sus chord with this with the G as a passing tone. And that's something that Monk would do also in various instances. Is he would have a really weird sounding passing tone, like the 7 to the flat 7. Then to the dominant 7 of D flat, to the dominant 7 to the 3 of D flat, to the 3 of G flat, which is where it ends, which is where that first line ends. Because the actual song is so Brad is going wait, what was it? Yeah. So if you wanted to do your own line like that over these chords, one thing that you could do, and this is without actually transcribing the line in different ways, which we're going to do, and it'll help us get familiar with this process, but it's the reason that this is important is because you can use that knowledge to build your own line over these chords that has a similar consistency to it. So like if you did an intro line, let's just look at a line that outlines the 3 even of every one of these chords. So it's not necessarily very musically interesting because it's just the 3, but if you migrate between the 3 and the 7 of any one of these, you can be like, and then you're staying in the same range up here. And if you like extend your range to do to go further away from those specific goal notes, then you can like but you're staying over the chords, you end up with like, which I'm not that familiar with the tune. I'm just reading through the changes, but you can like it caters to interesting ideas when you set your goal notes in relation to the chords of the progression. But anyway, that's all to say that he composed the line based on the chord progression. Now let's look at the line itself as it relates solely to itself. If you look at it in the context of just what you hear outside of the chord changes, there are a couple interesting elements. One is I like to look at the highest note and the lowest note of the line. So this is the highest note, and so this is your focal point to start. Sorry, I've got that pulled up. This is your focal point to start out, right?
Yeah.
And then I like to look at how that relates to the lowest bits of the line. So your first lowest note before you go back up is this, right? So you go all the way down, and then you go back up, and then down a little bit further, and then up a little bit further. You notice it's forming these different, they're little chunks that you can relate to each other in half steps. The first is what you start out with. These two, you're like bouncing between these two notes. That's something you see Miles Davis do a lot. Like, especially in like the later era when it got more based on rhythm, and melody than changes.
Yeah.
So you've got that up there, you got this down here, and you've got these running into each other on various sides of the line. So so there's a symmetry that forms. It's not a perfect symmetry because you end like the what I hear connecting to each other are this note and this note. So I'll put a slur there to remind myself. And then I'll put a slur there. In fact, that's all sort of like, so you have that you see over here, and then over here you have and then these notes here, the ba ba bum, lead past that note to this note. So you have these interwoven lines. So you have the line that goes, let's see if I can make that up. Oops. Ugh. just have those two overlaid slurs. So you have multiple lines down here that are going from G flat to F, and then you have another line that goes from C to B flat, where these half steps connect, and they connect like around each other. So these couple lines that you're working with are like they're found within the context of this one line. The first is between those, and the second is between that and that, and that and that. Your ending note. There's another connection that I would notice and pay attention to, which is you're starting by playing an E flat, so an A flat, and then an A, and the note that you end the entire phrase on is 1/2 step up, an octave down. An octave is a really interesting thing because you hear the same note, but it can be in a different place. And so it sounds obvious when you say it, but the nature of it is a lot more profound than it seems when you just state it or think about it, because you're actually going like that. But this note is down here, and the brain connects these two notes. So your brain connects you between the very first part of the phrase and the ending part of the phrase. Now, these aren't things that he's thinking of intuitively, I'm sure, when he... these are not things that he's thinking of consciously when he's playing it, I'm sure. But they are intuitive reasons that it sounds great, and that it's a very interesting line. Are you following me there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, to me, it's no different than when you play like the root sort of way down there, and then you play a third, like, over an octave up, and you get that really rich sound as opposed to just playing. That's
well, yeah, that's one use of octaves, but that's not why this is interesting. This is if you were to use like that analogy, it would be doing a line that starts here and ends here, like. That's interesting. You start here because, or like, that's a cool line. Why is that a cool line? Because you start it going down, and then your brain wants it to go down another half step, but instead you flip it and go up, and then end what would have been a half step down, but it's actually higher. It's actually the octave up. And that sounds like a monkism, doesn't it? Instead of going, that's easy. It like messes with your brain to go there. It like trips you up a little bit. You know?
Yeah.
You know? It's anyway. So we picked apart why this is interesting, looking at it on how all these different lines relate to each other, and I'm also going to point out from here to here is a connection. I like to print this out and just like draw lines on paper, but right now we're just doing it on the computer. So first thing I do is all of that. I transcribe it, I analyze it, I figure out why it's a great line. There's also the element of the using this tritone here, which eventually, if it's an F major, this is the flat 6, which is that interesting sound. And he's kind of like, he's hitting both of these, so it's, you're getting like a double, you're getting 2 points of interest simultaneously as they relate to the flat 6, because it could be the flat 2, which is at the end of this progression. That's the last chord of the progression, is the flat 2 with the dominant 7. But he also hits this, and you can your brain can kind of pick which one you wanna hear. So if it's this, then this is like the flat 6 leading to the 5. And if you're in a major, we've explored that sound before, right? You know, that it's the 1 to the minor 4 sound, which is the reverse harmony, the dark harmony that we talked about before. Are you following me here?
Yeah. I'm just, once again, I'm always thankful that these are recorded.
Okay.
It's a lot to take in.
Cool. I mean, let me know if you want me to repeat anything, or if you have any questions about all that.
No, it's fine. It's just interesting because when I think about a line like this, I always think about it less in terms of the way that you broke it down when you wrote it down and you said there's a relationship between this note and that note. Is I think about it more like motions, like little chunks of the line that you can then use. Like I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a diminished?
It's a half diminished. It's a G half diminished. But then he changes that root note to be a G flat, so it's actually like a G flat major 7 chord. Which you have the 1 and you have a G flat major 7 right above it, which is the tritone substitution of the 5.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's there in the piece.
So what I would do, if I was learning this and I was really breaking it down, what I try to do is I learned it in a bunch of different keys.
Mm-hmm.
And mainly because I was really interested in that, because I noticed that the second note that you're playing ends up becoming the top note of that next piece. So. So I'm sort of going through and drilling that change so that I can, go ahead.
Well, explain that again. I didn't quite understand where you said it went.
Okay, let me do the bendy laptop thing. So I was looking at it instead of, that's cool and everything, but I was interested in the.
Oh, got it.
And how those sound together. So.
Got it. Transcribing that around to different keys.
Yeah, but what interested me was the motion between the two, because that's to me in my head, I'm going, okay, that sound from this to this is something that I can use if I want to make that type of a sound in like an improvisation somewhere, or I'm looking for a direction to take something that, basically taking the 5th, dropping it to the bottom, and then using the 1 as the upper.
Yeah. So you're speaking of it in a very, very literal sense, and it doesn't need to be that literal. Like, that's one chord, right? It's a major chord with the 4 in the bottom of it. It's a sound that you can use in a bunch of different ways, just knowing that you're using a certain scale. And I would say, just take those notes that he's playing, maybe add a 6 so you have a little bit of capability for motion, and then you can make all sorts of melodies. Maybe add the 9. That's the 9. But then when you go to the second chord, it's a diminished 2. It's a half diminished 2. But what it actually really is a 4 that's minor with a natural 6. Oh, sorry. Is that right? Yeah. You know? You can do all sorts of stuff with it. So
But that's sort of like my starting point when I do learn something. This is like, I'm talking pre-Greg here, right? Like
yeah.
pre actually sitting down and learning from somebody that knows, what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But that kind of, I would always think about things in motions, and the way that I would move around the piano would determine like I always kind of, I knew about the tritone resolutions before you explained them to me, because I understood what they, like, I didn't understand what it was doing, but I knew it made this kind of, I knew it kind of made that sound. I just didn't know why it worked.
Totally.
So, anyways, I just wanted to sort of interject with like how I'd normally look at it, because it's like I'm looking at it one way and then you're explaining it this other way, and it's not totally foreign to me, but in many ways it
no, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, what I explained I think will be valuable, and you should go back and go over it and internalize it. But let's also, let's continue by starting from a point that you're familiar with and expanding upon that now. Okay? So, and there are so many things, like I said, in the last lesson we had, you could spend a lifetime learning from one line. There's so many different ways that you can pick it apart and glean information from it. So that was one thread I was going down, and that intersects with the thread that you were doing. So let's take that intersection and move down the thread of where you were going and expand upon that now.
Okay.
So we're looking at that one middle part. So let's outline what those chords are specifically. Okay? I'm going to write it in here. This is F major plus 4. No, not sharp 4. Add 4. Sorry. Add 4. There we go. It's a beautiful sound, because it's not quite a sus chord. Alright, so you have that, and then you have what I would say is actually a B flat minor 6 chord. And it's, I think, God, my music theory chops are so terrible now because I don't remember anything. But I think it's subdominant, because it goes, I know it's it's a fifth below the tonic, because the dominant is a fifth above, and now this is a fifth below the tonic. But if it's a minor 6 chord, I don't know if it's still called that. I think it is. So look at that, and look at these two chords, and now play the bass note there and play the bass note here. So you've got those two things, right? Okay, so now let's take that line. Let's just focus on this line now. So I'll show you my hands. So firstly, let's get it with hands together, okay? Do you have that?
That's weird in the left hand.
Yeah, it is. So I would spend a little time learning that. in time with a metronome. So then you're like, you know. Now flip it upside down. Flip each of the two chords upside down. So you're doing. Try that.
What? Wait, do it again.
Sorry. The first chord is that on F, right? So now flip that upside down. Yeah. Do it up the octave, the next one. So it's that's cool. You're starting at the end of the first line, so start on B flat, and then C. Nope.
C. That's
almost. So look. See,
you're ending on G, right?
This is why. No, you're ending on F. Oh wait. I'm sorry. You're right. No, you're not ending on G. You are ending on F because we're flipping the line itself. We're taking that first chunk and that second chunk and flipping each of them on their heads. So the first line starts on the last note of the first line, this is why I write it down. This is where it's so helpful. If you look at my screen, I know you don't really read music, but if you see, this is the first line right here, right? That's the first line. So now I'm flipping this. So instead of starting there, I'm starting there.
Yeah.
And I'm going backwards. Exactly.
I mean, that's what you're doing. You're doing...
Yep. Exactly.
Are you going...
And then the second line... No, because the second line starts... If you go to the end of the second line, it starts on G. Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So get that under your fingers. And you don't actually have to do it right now, but this is the practice technique that I would use for it. So get that under your fingers with each part of the line flipped upside down now. So now you have two things under your belt. You have that, and you have... which are both just as interesting because they both are using the same harmonic content. Now, the next thing I would do is learn both of those lines in every key. So it'll take a minute. And I would do it in half steps. So like, you have that. So now just do that up half step. Is that right? Yeah. That's it, exactly. And get it. Yeah, and you know what?
I learned it, and I didn't learn it in half steps up, but I bounced around in keys that I end up playing in a lot. Like.
Got you. Well, don't do that. Learn it in half steps so that you actually get a good view of the keyboard in your brain. Because the more that you do, the more that you take yourself out of what you're familiar with, the more you'll see different methods of different things on the keyboard. So I would actually, so that the rest of the line is cool too. You could do the whole rest of the line up in half steps. It's just if you have a limited amount of time, I would pick one chunk, like what you just did, those 8 notes, and get those backwards and forwards in every key. It's more of a bite-sized thing to break off, and it'll allow you to take one piece of the concept and use it in all of your playing.
Okay.
Because when you get that, and mind you, hands together and hands separately, left and right hand, both backwards and forwards. And I'm going to write that down.
Fine. So once you get to that point and you literally have it backwards and forwards, what do you do with that? Like how do you expand on it? Do you add a note? Do you take something away? Do you say I want to bend this a little bit more? Like what would your next steps be? Because that's going through and learning everything in every single key backwards and forwards is a technical thing. That's a mechanical thing.
The thing is, when you have that for something like this, when you have this in all the keys, and do this and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it will apply to you too. When you get that particular pattern that thoroughly, you will start to see the ways that those two chords interconnect, and then you'll be able to do what I did earlier, which is then use that as the baseline for your vocabulary, and you'll know which scales you're moving over, and then you can naturally improvise based on those scales and create your own melodies. Once it's under your fingers, then you're going like. Because you know this goes to here, you know that this goes to here, you know this goes to here, because you know tritones and you know where they resolve, right? And you know and you'll have the color of this chord ingrained in your head, so you'll be able to play.
And all that's just coming from past vocabulary that you sort of build on and build on and build on.
Exactly. It's all coming together in different ways, and I'm drawing from all sorts of my history, but focusing on this particular interconnectivity of chords. So yours won't be as complex as what I just did, but you'll be doing something. And then when you do another line, you'll be doing something that takes what data is in that other line and brings the two together. You know?
Yeah.
So, but the thing, I mean, this is a really cool line. Like, the more that I think about it, I would just learn this whole line in all keys, but make sure you have your left hand and your right hand doing it. Like, so, like, get it with a metronome, so that's perfect.
So that last part, is that an enclosure? Because it seems like it's really far out, but it seems like it's doing something to get to that.
Yeah, it totally is. What you're hearing starts when you have the G going to the G flat, and then he mimics that pattern starting on the C to the B, so a half step down, and interrupts it with the F, the root, and then goes back up to the B flat. So he's not enclosing it, but he's leading to it. What he's actually doing is just this. But that's not very interesting, right? So he starts with the first part of the pattern down, then does the first part of the pattern in the center where you're hearing it, breaks it up with the one down there, and then ends it with the B flat.
It seems like it's a pattern that you could keep doing that.
Yeah, but do it in half steps. That's not half steps that you just did. Oh wait, it is. I'm sorry. But yeah, so and that's a musical technique that is used all over the place, which is what I was talking about earlier. Just taking multiple lines. It's just, if you're doing that, it's just, but breaking it up, like you, or it's just it's you have those two lines that are moving simultaneously, and you're breaking them up in different ways. But he's doing that all over this line. So he plays this at the beginning and then breaks it up with the F. Otherwise, it's just, or it's not as interesting there. It's interesting if you break it up with a different note that's a further interval away. And he does it again down here. It's actually, and this is motivic content. This is motivic development. He's going down 3 half steps there, and he's going down 3 half steps there. That's taken from, like, you see that in contemporary classical composers. You see that everywhere. There and there, but it's broken up.
Yeah, I was thinking about that on that enclosure of how it's broken up, because when I was looking at it, even just with me alone, I was like, okay, that's what the motion is. Mm-hmm. It's just two ideas that are kind of split, and then like it's just rotating around that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Well, it starts here and it rotates down, and you could use that anywhere, like. That sounds much more interesting than this or this. All of those things, it's like bouncing your brain back and forth between two different lines. Mm-hmm. And you can do that all over the place. You know? Mm-hmm. So that's what I was talking about earlier. With it works on a micro level and a macro level. It works on the level of the entire phrase here, and it works on the level of these little micro moments, like at the end of the phrase. But to get this under your fingers, you have to learn it upside down, backwards, and forwards. We didn't get to the reverse, like the actual flipped on its head part of it, which I would do if I were learning a line like this. So like. I mean, you know, obviously this takes a long time to do because we've spent an hour just analyzing and, like, getting the first parts of it and talking about what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I could spend 2 hours on each of these other things that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So, one of which, I'm just writing these down. So, how do you extract all the possible information from a line? Pick a piece of the line to focus on. Learn hands separately and octaves together. Dissect the chords and understand which notes go together. That's meaning that's one chord, those notes go together, and then those go together.
Break down separate ideas.
Exactly. And then flip each idea on its head, timing-wise, not harmonically, but in time you're flipping it on its head. So and then get that in each hand, and hands together, and then do all of that up a half step. So. So get that in the right hand, and then the left hand. And I would have to get it smoothly with each of these, and then upside down. So get that smoothly, and then move it up a half step. So then you're get that, hands separately, flipped on its head, like do that through all the keys. Then the next thing that I would do after that is let's see, do all this hands separately in all keys. Okay, then the next thing after that is harmonically you flip it on its head, which that's a whole process in and of itself. So instead of going like that, you're picking your center point and you're flipping it all based on the center point. So if your center point is, and we talked about this in the Dark Harmony episode that we did, you find the fifth, which is there, and you pick the third. You pick the space in between the minor and major third. So it's halfway in between an A flat and an A.
Okay.
And you pivot everything based on that. So if it's an A, it becomes an A flat because you're pivoting it around that center point. If it's an F, you're a minor third down from A flat, so you want to go a minor third up from A. So now these are your two starting notes. And then if it's a C, it's a minor sixth down from A flat, so you want to go a minor sixth up from A, so it's F again. And if it's B flat, now it goes up relative. It's got to be a dominant 7, a minor 7 up from A because it's a minor 7 down from A flat. So it's this. So your first the first pattern is that. And now at this point you can do it in intervals, because it's basically you have your starting point and that's what you started with, and now the flipped is that, because we've just discovered that based on the pivoting around the halfway between the minor and major third. And I know I've lost you, but you'll watch the video for this.
Well, the notes are in the way too, so I'm like, okay, I gotta do this by ear.
Oh shit! I'm sorry. Here. My bad. Okay. That's your down. This is your up. Now, the so you can do it by interval now. So if you just look at if you do it the same intervals downwards, if you do it the same intervals upwards, that this is downwards, that becomes I think that's it. Is that it? Nope, that's not it. It's yeah, that's it. So flipped around halfway between the A flat and the A, that becomes this. And I look at that just because it's major third, minor third, minor third. So major third, minor third, minor third. So your pattern becomes what did it become? Shoot. That's it. And now listen to how that relates to what you did right side up. That versus it's oddly familiar, isn't it?
Yeah.
So now take that line, and learn that in every key with both hands, and figure out what makes that tick. It's just, it sounds a lot more simple when it's right side up, when it's upside down like this, because you're dealing in minor with the dominant 7.
Yeah.
And it's not as foreign to the ear, actually. The reason that the line is cool in the first place is because it's a little foreign to the ear because it already sounds upside down. This, when you flip it upside down, now it sounds a little more right side up. Because you're just using a minor third of the F and then the dominant, which is C7. So it makes it make even a little more sense. But then I would learn that in all the keys. So then flip that, I would do that up a half step. And then up a half step. Is that right? And then up a half step. And then when you get all of that, hands together and hands separately, when you flip it back on its head, it will also have a new perspective for you. And you'll be able to use it musically in different ways. Just like, and but that's when you start to use it intuitively. And this is all for the purposes of getting your brain more familiar with that harmonic content so that you can be free and express intuitively using that content.
Yeah. By the way, if I'm just sitting here sometimes nodding my head, yeah, I'm taking it in, and I'm just like, sometimes it's a little harder for me to follow and then like articulate back like what I understood or what I didn't understand. Most of the time I do follow it. I'm just like, okay, this will make more sense upon review.
Totally. That's all good. No, it's fair. Yeah, cool. So I feel like we've covered that pretty thoroughly. The only thing that I would recommend doing is taking what I just told you and expand it to the entire line when you have time, because it'll be helpful to get the rhythmic content too. What we just explored was the harmonic content, but the other stuff that he was doing is rhythmic and very powerful. So I would do that for the rhythmic content as well.
Okay, when you say the rest of the line, you mean that?
Yeah, and the beginning. Or whatever that was at the end.
I wanted to ask you about something that since you've been doing these kind of like daily improvisations, right?
Yeah.
And
sort of, I did like 2 of
what
them.
I've noticed is there's a certain ferocity that you bring to it. Like I'm like, damn, Greg's trying to rip his piano a new asshole. Like, like he's really going at it. Like he had a really bad day today.
Yeah.
And that was interesting to me when you played that way because it's so different from the way that I've heard you play just dicking around when you're giving examples, whether it's with me or on your YouTube channel. And it was really interesting. So I was kind of curious, like what, even going back and looking at your daily improvisation that you did when you, I guess, first started the whole weekly piano YouTube channel, it's like totally different. It's worlds apart from what I've normally heard you play. And it's like, I thought it was just a one-off, but then you did 2 of them in a row that were pretty, like, gnarly. And I'm kind of curious, like, how that came about, and is that the way you normally play when you want to bang something out, improvise solo?
I find it, when I'm using the piano as like, the stuff I'm showing you right now, I'm not really focusing on the piano being an orchestra in and of itself. I'm focusing on it being a single instrument in the context of an orchestra. In this case, I'm thinking of it as a jazz band. And that's sort of how Meldau was playing in the context of that improvisation, even though it was solo piano, because you could play in various ways, right? You could be doing these lines that are like a singular line. But if I'm doing that and I'm trying to play it as an improvisation and I'm just expressing emotional content, I generally use the breadth of it, like the cello register and the bass register, like the viola, like the violins, like an actual orchestra. You know, and and then create compositions based on that, using the same types of things. Like, there are similar lines in there, but it tends to be a lot thicker, which is probably what you're hearing. You know, like that sort of thing. So it's just a lot more harmonic, a lot more tonal content in there.
Yeah.
What, if that sort of, does that answer your question at all?
That's what I noticed when I was listening to you playing, is I was like, it is very, it's almost entirely harmonic at times. And then, like, occasionally when you guys would have something that's really, like, rich and lush, I would hear, and I don't know if I was hearing it right, but, like, you would throw something in there that almost had, like, a monk chordal quality. Like, it was really weird. Like, you would just have these brief little moments where there would be something that would be just jarring enough to be just interesting.
Yeah, totally. I love shit like that.
I kept meaning to, like, catalog when I was listening to your playing. I think it was, like, the first one that you played. It was, like, 134. There was, like, a really cool change, and I was like, I should bring that up to him and ask him what was the thought process on that. Because I actually, at some point, if you keep posting these improvisations, and I don't think you've posted one for a few days, Greg, so, like, what the fuck? I'd like to actually go back through some of them, and, you know, when I find an interesting point, it's you know, it's kind of funny, we're going through and we're interesting Meldau's thing, and it's not like we get an opportunity to sit him down and, like, you know, like you did with Rustlin or any of the other people, and be like, can you examine, you know, this line with us? You know, I can't do that, but I can do that with you.
Totally.
I can't go over your solo playing or your improvisation and go, like, all right, tell me how would you twist this apart? Like, can you explain it, since it's your fucking brain?
Yeah, man. Totally. And the thing is, in the moment, I'm often not really thinking about it. I can observe it, and if I'm really truly present, then I do observe it, but most of the time I'm not quite present enough to even observe what I'm doing. I'm just doing. And then when I go back after the fact, I can break it apart and say what I was doing, but in the moment I'm not really paying attention to it. You know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I had the same problem, because when you started posting those, I was like, wow, I should, you know, try to improvise something and play. And I was like, well, I'm not going to record tonight. And I sat down, and I had my headphones on because my wife had gone to bed. And I don't even really remember what I played, but I remember at the end of it, because oftentimes when you're playing the music, you'll sometimes feel like it's complete shit, and then you go back and listen to it, and you like it. And, well, this time I actually felt like it sounded good, and I remembered lines where I was like, wow, that was a really cool idea. I don't know how I came upon that. I really wish I would have just hit record.
I know. You always record, man. That's one of the reasons I built this studio, because, like, it's just easy to press record, and it's always recording in great quality, so I can capture whatever and then release stuff if I want to, and just leave it in the archives if I want to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I might need to start doing that at least a little bit, because of what you're saying is, like, you kind of internalize this stuff, and then you're not really conscious of it when it's happening. And I've noticed that even in my playing now, when I do improvise something, in the moment I'm drawing on something that I've learned from our lessons, and it's kind of cool to see that new stuff pop up intermittently, like when I'm playing something, because it's like what you said, you don't want to get too stuck in your comfort zone or it gets kind of mundane. And I'll be in the middle of something and I'll feel that urge to do the comfort zone thing, and then it's like, no, I want to do what I learned in this lesson or something I picked up along the way.
Yeah, totally. And eventually it just becomes intuitive on that level. You don't even need to think that. It just becomes part of your playing.
Well, I kind of like where it's at now. I like being on the cusp of constantly learning new things, and it's almost entirely due to these lessons, so thank you for doing them. But it's added a kind of new excitement to playing, because it's weird when I sit down and I start a song. I'll start with the familiar, and then as it goes on, like, more and more new stuff comes out, even things I never really thought of, like ideas. It just happens, and it's kind of neat seeing that, because it's been a while. So maybe I'll record some of it and start putting them on Facebook, since I don't think many people actually know I play piano.
Yeah, man. I mean, you might as well, at the very least, just start recording it. It's easy. If you got your keyboard, just press record.
Yeah, I have an extra jump. Well, this one you have to plug a jump drive in, and then it records like
Gotcha.
I guess a week or something. But yeah, I probably will.
Cool.
All right. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time since you've been pretty crazy. Okay.
Yeah, I do have to go and try to handle
Well, I
shit
hope this
for
is
me.
a nice interlude from all the other shit that you had to deal with.
It was great, man. Actually, very it helps with like expanding my mind out in different directions. And hopefully, this will play into the shows that I'm playing over the next few days.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool, man.
All right. You said you're gonna upload the other video.
I'll upload both of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me just like, I'll do that now-ish. I'll try to have that done today.
Okay. I mean, if you have other stuff going on, that's cool. I was just hoping to be able to look back because I know if you're going to be on tour for what was it, like 9 or 10 days starting tomorrow.
Yeah. You want to be able to view the videos.
Yeah.
There's a way for me to grab them off of it onto a hard drive. It's just my hard drive on my computer has been maxed out, and so I can't upload from my phone. But I might even be able to upload it from my phone to the Wi-Fi or to YouTube directly. Maybe I can do that. I'm gonna try.
Might, because I don't know if you can edit within YouTube if you wanted to do the starting point. Because I know you were gonna have a particular point tonight that you wanted to start at.
Yeah, I'll figure that out.